Netflix has made a lot of revolutionary stuff and that we shouldn't call it garbage every 2 weeks just because it releases something that is incredibly bad. And I don't know what I'm doing with my hands, so let's move on.
No! God, please, no! No!
And here we are back again to talk about Netflix original content, which is the best across all platforms in the whole universe and across all different multiverses. Let's find out why I think that. Welcome back to Torn Apart, and today we're talking once again about Netflix, and this video is actually part 2. But I'm gonna give you some context as well in case you don't give a shit about watching part 1. It's completely okay, you're just gonna be missing out on a lot of interesting content. What is the context? The context is that I'm trying to prove that Netflix has the most amount of groundbreaking originals out there, and it's probably the only platform that you need. No, actually, I don't believe that. You probably need a lot of different streaming platforms because there's a lot of good stuff out there. And let's talk about the comedy subgenre, and here we have quite a lot of stuff to talk about. Some of them are gonna be well known and others are probably not as well known because we all have different senses of humor at the end of the day, and I'm pretty sure that not everything is for everyone.
Whoa! What is that?
Oh, don't worry, don't
What,
worry.
you've never seen tits before?
Turn that off. Yeah, those are minor tits.
But there are 2 series here that probably everybody knows and that have attracted quite a lot of interest on Twitter and across social medias just in general. Of course, I'm talking about Sex Education and Heartstopper. Sex Education is one of those series that basically started the teenagers are actually disgusting and obsessed about sex kind of thing, but casting actual really like young people, talking about more modern themes as well, talking about consent. There are actually books that came out, like a guide to sex education that came out like a couple of years ago as well, pairing it up with the 2nd season and stuff like that. This is a series that is actively trying to tell you what not to do and what to do to be a better partner, to be a better person as well. And it is starring some of the most cute and sometimes disgusting and traumatizing and lovable people that I've ever seen. And it probably like kind of reignited a lot of careers, especially Asa Butterfield, who basically disappeared for quite some time after doing a lot of films when he was much younger. And thanks to this series, people realized, well, he's actually good. He's really good at doing this acting thing, right? There are other series like Big Mouth, for example, which talk about sex quite a lot. And in the early 2000s, we had a lot of series like this as well, and a lot of films, but they were mostly jokes at the expense of people who were inexperienced in sex, and that was basically it. We were just basically pointing fingers and laughing at people for being bad at sex.
My older brother always says like the nastiest shit. Like he called me Hyman until I was 12. Seth, I want to blow you.
And she didn't say that.
When it comes to Heartstopper, it's one of those series where it's not really based on trauma porn, because there is a lot of talk when it comes to LGBT stories that they're only based on bullying, they're only based on the pain of coming out, and there is not as much space about being cute, being in love, and just following them, the couple, as you would in a romantic comedy in a straight environment, basically. And Heartstopper was one of those series that was like, everyone could relate to this, right? The feeling of not knowing what to say, the feeling of liking someone but not being sure if they like you back. And there was something very innocent that almost everyone could identify with this series, and I felt like it was really special, and there are not that many series out there which managed to capture that. But there are a lot of actual other comedies that I want to talk about, but I'm mainly gonna be mentioning them very quickly because there are so many. One of them is Atypical, which is a very good story about neurodivergent people, and it's probably one of the first series that I watched where people on the autism spectrum were living kind of normal lives and had interesting things going on with them, and they were not just Sherlock Holmes types, if you know what I mean.
I am a surgeon. I am a surgeon. I am a surgeon. I am a surgeon. Doctor, I am a surgeon.
Atypical is the best series for that, and weirdly enough, it stayed consistently good until the very end. Another series that did that is Dairy Girls. I'm pretty sure the first few seasons were actually like on the BBC or Channel 4 or something like that. I don't think that Netflix actually produced the entirety of it, but it is so incredibly good, and now people rediscovered it and they know it thanks to Netflix. Honestly, if you like Irish/British humor, you're gonna love this series without a doubt. Then we've got another series called Everything Sucks, which is basically the freaks and geeks of our generation. It's a very good limited series. It's about middle schoolers as well, so it's not like Sex Education where we're looking once again at older teenagers. It's very interesting and it has a bit of a retro look, which is kind of fun. We've got Dear White People, which is one of those series where like if you could give something to white people to understand the black experience, specifically the African American experience, Dear White People is the best show for that. I feel like that show has gained quite a lot of praise in the US, but here in Europe, when they talk about Dear White People, there is no one who basically knows what it is about, and it's amazing. The first season specifically, when you get towards the end, it's less good, mostly because I think it turns into an all lives matter kind of thing, while it was really anchored just on African American issues, and I think that it just diluted the main point of it. It's still incredible though, and I really recommend it. We've got American Vandal, which I discovered that it was a Netflix original. I actually didn't know. I thought this was something that Netflix was just running, and if you like documentaries, this is basically a mockumentary about a vandal in a high school doing incredibly weird pranks, and it's kind of shot in the same style as like a Netflix docuseries. It's honestly the funniest shit ever. I'm pretty sure, once again, this is something that got quite a lot of praise in the US, in Europe, especially in France. Nobody knows it, so I wanted to mention it. The Politician, really good Netflix series, especially the first season, and really cool if you're interested in politics as well, and how you can turn small political environments that are going on in high school into big stakes kind of country leading politics. It's super interesting. Once again, there's a lot of LGBT messages going on, and it's also quite interesting when it comes to representing teenagers interested in politics, which doesn't have a lot of positive representations, especially nowadays when you think about it. Then we've got one show which is the weirdest shit ever. I watched it with my mom. We discovered it over the summer, and best thing that we ever did. It's called Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Unbreakable, they alive, damn it. But females are strong and unbreakable, they alive, damn it. It's a miracle.
It's one of the funniest, quirkiest kind of sitcoms ever. It's probably the only sitcom I would ever recommend that came out in the last probably 10 years or so, because like it needs to be protected. Honestly, there is no other way that I can actually explain why this is so good. If there is a bit of an inner child in you that kind of wants to come out, this is the show for you without a doubt. That is basically it when it comes to comedy. You thought we were finished? No, we're going into yet another incredible subcategory, which is gonna be animation. We have so much to talk about. Like honestly, I was shocked when I was going back into my history and finding out that so many of my favorites were actually Netflix originals. Let's start with Bojack Horseman, which is one of the best animated shows probably in history. That's not an exaggeration. And then across the other things that were well marketed and probably a lot of people know them by now, just in case maybe you need this kind of reminders / recommendations. Disenchantment, really cool series by the same creator that did The Simpsons, especially the first 2 seasons. Then it starts getting a bit repetitive and kind of falls in the same traps as The Simpsons themselves. Then we've got Love, Death and Robots, which honestly is some of the best animation, some of the best motion cap as well that I've ever seen. And this is the example that I come up with when people start talking about Avatar's effects, especially the Way of the Water as well. And I'm like, Love, Death and Robots did it like 5 years before this movie came out, but still it doesn't have the same recognition because it's animated short films and James Cameron is James Cameron. But anyways, check it out because it's very digestible. Every single short is a different one. It's kind of like Black Mirror. Oh, I forgot to talk about Black Mirror. Actually, no, I didn't talk about it mostly because it was not created by Netflix. It was just revived by Netflix. Anyways, let's go back to animation. Castlevania, one of the best animated shows ever. One of the best vampire shows that I've ever seen in my whole life. I didn't even play the Castlevania games, and it made me so invested in this universe. They also came out with a spin-off called Castlevania Nocturne, which was actually quite good. Anyways, it was one of the most original stories starring vampires that I'd probably ever seen, mostly because the vampire genre has become quite stale in the last few years, and there is not that much representation for epic fantasy vampires, the kind of stuff that we used to see with movies like Underworld. Castlevania is exactly that. We've got Arcane with the second season coming out this year, incredible, and as a League of Legends player, I will admit that I was actually quite astonished by the world building that they managed to instill in this universe that even I didn't notice, because when you play League of Legends, you don't necessarily like look at all of these details like they did in the TV show. But I talked about Arcane in a previous video a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, where I go a little bit more into details in why I think it's an incredible series. Same goes with Cyberpunk Edge Runners. It's a series that I talk about constantly. It's a series that is actually better than the video game itself, if I'm honest, and I actually think that I talked about this in the same video as Arcane. I'm just gonna link you to that one because I did the work way better in that video. Having said that, we've got a lot of other animated shows. First of all, Midnight Gospel. I talk about this show constantly. It's incredible. It's kind of like being on shrooms and listening to the most existential podcast ever while they're kind of showing you the weirdest imagery possible. It's a very weird experience. It's a limited series. It's incredible. Some of the best animation that I've ever seen, and it's astonishing that no one talks about it. Talking about something unique that no one has ever seen, Maya and the Three, which is a series starring Aztec tradition and culture, which is something that honestly I can't remember seeing ever, unless maybe you mentioned the movie The Road to El Dorado, which is not saying a lot because that was still done through the lens and perspective of white people and Spaniards as well, who were colonizers of those places. Maya and the Three as a point of view of an indigenous person. It has the action, it has the music, the colors, the vibe, everything, just bad marketing and no one saw it. There is an Italian TV show which is called This World Can't Tear Me Down, and it's basically created by this comic book artist who is Italian and who is really well known actually over there. It's incredible. It's based in Rome and it's basically talking about anti-fascist people fighting against fascists. Basically, it's taking place in contemporary Italy right now. It's some of the funniest things I've ever seen. If you want to watch something that really shows you what it feels like to live in Italy right now, this is the best show for you. Without a doubt, check it out. He made another show as well, which is less well made and less emotionally resonant, but still, you can check it out as well if you like this one.
The Pokémon Resort! I can't believe I'm actually here!
The next one that probably a lot of people know, it's Pokémon Concierge, which came out I think around Christmas time. One of the cutest shows I've ever seen, and honestly I have nothing else to add because there is not that much plot going on, but I'm pretty sure that you forgot about it because it was basically talked about for like 2 weeks and then people forgot about it. But it exists and I think it's the cutest stop motion animation that I've ever seen. Also probably the first time that they've made a stop motion animated Pokemon thing, right? So once again, Netflix doing something incredibly groundbreaking. We've got Pluto, which is an incredible limited series. It's an anime as well. I'm not gonna spoil it, but basically if you like things like Akira, you're gonna love Pluto as well. We've got one series that is basically the best series that I watched from last year, but maybe ever as well. It's called The Blue Eye Samurai, and I don't know that many people who actually watched it. It's probably the first time ever that I saw a woman in these kind of action roles without being sexualized like in Kill Bill, for example. So it has a lot of representation. It has a really cool story about vengeance. It's breathtaking. Honestly, it's one of the most beautiful animated things that I've seen probably ever. And if you like, for example, things made by Tartakovsky, you're gonna love Blue Eye Samurai as well, because I feel like there's a lot of different animation style references that go back to Tartakovsky's style as well. Another show that came out last year and that I feel like we forgot already, it's Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Scott Pilgrim, the live action version, was incredibly good and no one was expecting it, and it has such a cult following. But Scott Pilgrim Takes Off did something that nobody expected, which is rewrite the original comic and do something completely different, bringing back the whole voice cast as well. It's kind of like creating a sidequel scenario here, where if you watch the film, if you read the manga, and if you watch this series here, you get 3 different versions of the same kind of story, but told in different ways, and it's just fascinating. And I'm honestly quite astonished that Netflix does so well when it comes to animation. I could also mention Big Mouth, but I feel like Big Mouth was interesting only for the first 2 or 3 seasons, so it's not as consistently good as all of the other things that I've mentioned, so pretend that I didn't say anything, okay?
That's good to know.
Wait, what? Don't write this down. Are you filling out a form?
No, I'm just drawing a picture of a unicorn.
Oh. You have a sweet side.
Butt fucking Mr. Clean.
Now let's jump to the drama category, and here we have once again quite a lot of shows that I need to mention quickly, because otherwise this video will take 72 hours to add on top of the 72 hours that it was supposed to do last time, right? Let's talk about Ozark. Ozark is basically Breaking Bad with like a lower budget, and if it focused a bit more on the family drama, like it's a more realistic kind of Breaking Bad. I feel like Breaking Bad is really focused on the drama and the kind of like deification of the main character, while Ozark is like, what would it actually be like for a family to be so tightly involved in a crime business like this? It's incredible, honestly, and it's on Netflix, so of course I'm gonna talk about it. We've got another series which got quite a lot of awards last year. I'm talking about Beef, which is incredible, and honestly I don't know what else to say about Beef. I don't think that I've talked about it on this channel, besides maybe on my best like TV shows from last year video, but it's one of those series that are basically deconstructing anger and talking about anger management issues, and also talking about Asian representation and the fact that Asian people in the United States, but probably anywhere around the world, they're not really allowed to express their anger, and they're not really allowed to express it like other people can. You hardly imagine, for example, Asian people screaming in the street, and it's really emotionally resonant with anyone, because it's a human struggle, right? We're really stressed out and we want to be angry, but we're not allowed to, because we have to be civilized beings. And what does it mean to be civilized in this kind of place that we built for ourselves, right? Then we've got Mindhunter. Of course, after so much time of talking about Netflix series, I'm gonna talk about the series that everyone is begging them to bring back, Mindhunter. Let's recognize that it's probably one of the best series ever made. It brought together 2 different audiences, the people who love those weird crime dramas and people who love David Fincher fictional stuff. It brought them together, united them, and married them forever. Mindhunter is incredible. We've got Dark, of course, and I would recommend you only watch 2 seasons of Dark. I have an entire video explaining why I think you shouldn't watch this 3rd season of Dark, and probably the only people who don't know it are people who don't want to read subtitles, because Dark is actually a German series, and this is the series that made Netflix famous / popular even before Stranger Things. It gained such a huge cult following. I didn't actually watch it when it was originally airing, and I don't really know why. Mostly because I thought it was the same thing as Stranger Things, and I was so completely wrong. Incredible performances. I don't need to hype you up about Dark at the end of the day. I think that if you love mysteries, you're gonna love Dark as well. Maybe skip this 3rd season. I have an entire video deconstruction about why you shouldn't watch the 3rd season and how it ruins everything about the entire concept. So maybe check it out if you want to watch the 2 seasons and then want to get some revelations about the 3rd ones without having to actually sit through them. Then of course we've got a series that everybody talked about, even my parents watched it, and that's kind of the marker that I used for a series that everybody knows about. It's The Queen's Gambit, which is the weirdest concept ever. I find it fascinating when I think about it. The series that actually end up becoming incredibly popular. The Queen's Gambit is without a doubt one of those series where I would have never imagined it going popular, because it has to do with like a random girl becoming incredibly good at chess, becoming maybe the best in the world. It's not really based on a true story, and people still loved that shit. Anya Taylor-Joy like became so famous thanks to this series. So we all have to thank The Queen's Gambit Gambit for revealing the talent of Anya Taylor-Joy, even though I'd known her for quite some time, mostly because I watched The Witch. We've got other series like 13 Reasons Why, and listen, I know that 13 Reasons Why is literally almost a meme at this point on how Netflix handled that whole thing in a really bad way, but it kind of changed a lot of things when it comes to the things that we can show on our TV screens and what we can show without actually like putting any censoring. It was an interesting moment to be alive, basically, when 13 Reasons Why came out. I watched the series, I immediately bought the book as well, and it resonated with me quite a lot. It's trauma porn, we have to recognize it, and it's probably the things that you hate the most about teen dramas. It's very on the nose, but it's heartbreaking. Like, honestly, there are some scenes in 13 Reasons Why that like will stay in my mind forever, especially the first season. Forget about everything else, let's talk about just the first season. It's definitely iconic in a dangerous ways as well, because it's talking about suicide ideation as well, and people actually succeeding at that as well, which is kind of sad, but it got us talking about all of those topics, and it definitely started the discussions about mental health in younger people, whether it is teenagers or whether it is young adults as well. Same thing goes for Bojack Horseman. For me, those two series go together. And of course, we've got You as well, which was revived by Netflix, so I'm not gonna spend that much time about it, mostly because you know it as well. Kind of like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, it has a very special audience for it, and it's talking about people with obsessive compulsive disorders. Of course, maybe you think that You is one of those series that are incredibly cliche and that only certain people are interested in it, but when I watched You for the first time, I realized that this is exactly how I perceive most romantic comedies. Like, all of the romantic gestures, and this is basically why also romantic comedies don't work for me anymore, just because I cannot suspend my disbelief, and You was kind of like the final chapter in that. It kind of turned everything upside down, where what if you actually got attention from a guy who was like literally a serial killer, an abuser, or something like that. You know, you think about The Tinder Swindler, this is basically the fictional version of it when it comes to You. And I don't know, I think it changed definitely something when it comes to relationships, and if it didn't change them, it definitely like gave us a pop culture reference for something that is not really horror, something that is not really a romantic comedy, something that is perfectly in between, and that kind of says something about our dating preferences and the things that we recognize as romantic at the end of the day, like social media stalking, which is something that was definitely not really popularized, but we talked about it way more thanks to You. As we finish the drama subcategory, I'm gonna be talking about two other shows, one that I watched with my mom as well during the summer. It's a great series, it's called Dead to Me. It's about female friendships, and there is a mystery at the very core. There is murder as well, hiding crimes, there is quite a lot of things going on. It's one of those series that actually ended quite well. The final season was incredible, but the best one is always the first ones when it comes to these series here, and it reminded me of kind of like a darker version of Gilmore Girls, where basically you focus so much on a friendship that it kind of feels like you know those people. They're kind of like part of your friends group, and even though they're toxic, even though maybe they're kind of obsessive and they have a lot of bad things going on with them, you still love them no matter what they do, and it's a beautiful thing. And not a lot of people know about That to Me. I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people have seen it, so I wanted to recommend it as well. I think it's one of the best things you can find there. Another one, which is a really tough watch as well, talking about the real life story, I think it's a book as well, it's called Unorthodox, and it's basically about a Jew Orthodox community living in the US and a woman that is basically trying to escape from it, and she moves back to Germany. I actually discovered this series quite late, not when it was coming out, so I can't really testify and tell you that it was not properly received and it gained like audience attention and stuff like that, but it's definitely something that we forget it happened. And it's an incredible show, it's incredibly tense, and it kind of like reveals something that you never see in our society because it's such a closeted community, right? Love it. It's one of the best dramas you can check out on Netflix. Now let's add into Based on a True true story kind of drama, we could spend so much time on this, right? Because Netflix kind of thrives on those stories. There are two that actually became incredibly popular, and once again, they kind of like put different audiences together, like Mindhunter did. I'm talking about Monster, Jeffrey Dahmer, the story, I forget the title, it's so complicated. And I'm talking about Baby Reindeer, which is a show that came out only a couple of weeks ago and that people loved, absolutely loved, that once again has themes dealing with social media anxieties and obsession and trauma. It's a tough watch. It's a really tough watch, and I'm honestly quite shocked that Netflix produced it because it feels more like an HBO kind of thing, right? Don't you agree? When it comes to Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer thing, I have an entire video talking about that, which is about trauma and about the way that we portray trauma in our media. I think it's really interesting. Check it out because I talk about those issues way better over there. And then we've got two other series which came out a couple of years ago. We got Inventing Anna, which is really good, talking about a real life story as well. If you like The Tinderless Swindler, you're gonna like Inventing Anna as well. And one series that nobody talks about, and that I have a video for it as well because I'm one of those niche motherfuckers, it's the Andy Warhol Diaries, which is a really cool docu-series basically based on the book The Andy Warhol Diaries. It feels very personal. They used AI plus a performance to kind of recreate the voice of Andy Warhol himself, and it's fascinating when it feels like you're listening to him but it's not him at the same time. So it's kind of like a voice coming from out of the grave, and this series made me love also Andy Warhol as a figure, and it made me understand him as a human being more than an actual just artist at the end of the day. Netflix does these kind of docu-series really well. There are so many that I could name, but I honestly do not have the time. I could point you in the direction of this video that I made, which is talking about one of the best filmmakers that I found that is mostly specialized on making docu-films about murderers and kidnappers and stuff like that, and she's made quite a lot for Netflix, so check it out. I'm pretty sure that if you like those things, you're gonna love my video about it as well. Now let's head into my final category of the day. Finally, we've, I think, almost proved that Netflix has quite an interesting history when it comes to TV shows, right? But let's talk about foreign stuff. I know that I've mentioned Dark and I've mentioned other shows which are in foreign language, but right now I want to give a spotlight to the shows that we all went together to consider them as the best shows ever of that year. Let's talk about Squid Game. Of course, everybody knows about it. They even made a reality show that I personally didn't watch, but apparently it was quite successful. There's a new season coming out, and also I feel like Squid Game is almost like the better version of that Japanese film that I can't remember right now, but it's probably has to do with the fact that Squid Game is just a bit more modern. I'm pretty sure if they were to remake the film, it would be better. But then we've got other things like Alice in Borderland, which is one of the best kind of like dystopian science fiction series that I've seen in a really long time. I watched it a little bit too late, and it's basically about these people being transported in a different universe where they have to play these weird survival games to try and get out, because basically everyone disappeared and they are in this weird empty world where they can either play these games or die, and it's honestly fascinating. It's so incredibly cool. We also have Kingdom, which introduced me to Korean stuff and mostly to the idea of zombie as kind of like a creature being used by different cultures. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of zombie films, but I mostly know American zombie films, and I honestly grew quite tired of the way that they were handling those kind of stories, and thanks to Netflix I discovered Kingdom, which is basically like a revisionist history, like period drama starring zombies as well, and it's taking place in that period of time where basically South Korea, but basically Korea, was fighting against Japan at the same time. It's incredible. Honestly, if you like period dramas, if you like Shogun, you're gonna love Kingdom, and we need more things like Kingdom because so many more things would be improved by adding zombies to it, and period dramas is without a doubt one of those things because it makes it so much more interesting. Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck? It's one of those shows also that remained consistently good until the very end, and we still don't know whether we're ever gonna get a new season, even though we got a spin-off film which was actually quite good. Let's talk about Korean stuff. We also have Hellbound, which is a really good supernatural series. We also have All of Us Are Dead. Once again, really good zombie series talking about teenagers. They're the main characters in this story. Most recently we got Parasite the Great, which is another adaptation of the manga Parasite. It was honestly really cool, and I kind of was weirded out by the fact that we talked about it for almost like just 1 week and everyone forgot about it. The special effects are super cool. It's very well shot. It's super interesting as well. It has a bit of a K-drama to it, like they're exaggerating it a little bit, I could feel that, but it's still really interesting. K-dramas are doing it for me lately, I don't know why. But basically, just out of all the shows that I've named today and pairing it with the other video, we talked about 58 TV shows.
Wow. You're amazing, dude.
Just produced by Netflix in the last few years. I don't know if I went back to like 10 years ago, I'm not sure. Maybe Bojack Horseman is one of the oldest ones that Netflix has ever produced, but it's insane. The amount of content they've created is insane. And there are so many subcategories which I didn't even talk about. For example, there was this series called 100% Physical, which is a reality TV, so I didn't talk about all the original reality TV shows that they've created, which are really popular for certain audiences. I personally do not watch them. I haven't talked about documentaries, which I mentioned only previously. I haven't talked about stand-up shows. I started watching stand-up shows as reruns of stand-up shows only thanks to Netflix. I never sat down and watched stand-up shows if it wasn't for Netflix, basically. Maybe it's a more normalized thing in the United States, but in France, if you want to go to a stand-up show, you actually go to one. You don't watch a rerun of the stand-up show at home. It's weird, and I feel like Netflix definitely popularized that thing where like I spent days watching these kind of stand-up shows, and I want to mention just two of them that kind of revolutionized everything. Bo Burnham's Inside, talking about the pandemic, of course, talking about social isolation, incredible stand-up show, and Anna Gadsby's Nanette, which is an incredible stand-up show when it comes to talking about LGBT rights and talking about anger once again, and it being repressed basically, and not being able to express that kind of anger out there for all of the people that you see being hurt. But that is basically it. I think I talked quite a lot about Netflix. I'm pretty sure I forgot about some categories as well. These are only the shows that I've watched, that I've experienced, so that's why those are the ones that I'm actually telling you to watch at the end of the day. I wouldn't really advise you to watch something that I've never seen, for example. That would be kind of weird. This made me realize that I watched way too much TV in the last few years, and I almost spent as much time watching TV as I spent watching films, so I have quite a lot of baggage when it comes to quality when I think about it. Having said that, this is it. I hope that you're gonna get some positive things from this video, like that you're not gonna take it as an insult, and you're not gonna be like, why didn't you compare it to HBO Max's catalog? Why didn't you compare it to Prime's catalog, Apple TV Plus? I didn't do that because honestly, Netflix has the most amount. When it comes to really revolutionary stuff, things that have grown up to the zeitgeist as well. Maybe I could have compared it to HBO's content because it's the one that is most consistent and that people have recognized as quality TV. There was actually a module back when I was studying film at university which was called Quality TV, and it was mostly based on HBO content. Like, they're the ones who actually are to thank for TV being taken way more seriously than we used to take it, especially from a critical perspective, not necessarily from audiences ourselves. Having said that, did you enjoy this video? I talked for quite a long time. I'm pretty sure that the rushes are like 2 hours long, but anyways, if you liked this video, don't forget to come back on my channel. Here down at the bottom, I'm gonna be putting other videos that you can check out talking about the same topics as before, and here at the top I'm gonna be showing you what I'm working on for the next few weeks, hoping that nothing changes, because sometimes something grabs me and I need to talk about it. A very interesting film topic like the one that I talked about in the last few weeks with Netflix. Don't forget to smash that like button. Every single time that you do that, you make sure that we get more original content for everyone to see.
Can I count on you?
Mostly TV shows though, right? Because I feel like the cinemas are suffering right now, and that mostly has to do with the kind of like weird laws where in the US, for example, they're not even waiting 2 weeks to release things straight to streaming, which is a really bad thing. So promote TV shows, which is stuff that we always watch at home, right? That doesn't kill cinemas, and we want to support cinemas and we want to support streaming platforms. They can both coexist. That's what I think anyways. I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Back in the 90s, I was in a very famous TV show.